Alrighty, folks. Welcome in to the Unfinished Legacy podcast, the Man of Color edition. My name is Waun Smith. I oversee the Man of Color initiative stemming out of the Thrive Center. I'll let my colleagues introduce who they are and their responsibilities.
Responsibilities.
No,
we're having
things
fun.
that you have to do.
I don't like that.
Yes.
My name is Derwin, and I'm also a staff member here at Thrive Center. My position is Outreach and Advocacy Coordinator / Strengths Coach. And so I've been supporting Waun throughout this past year, and my former colleague TJ too as well, when he was doing this too as well, when it first started. So good to meet you all.
Nice to meet you, Derwin.
Nice to meet you. Welcome in.
Much pleasure.
I'll go next. My name is Fred Huang. I use he, him pronouns. I am, as of about a week ago, the new senior coordinator of financial wellness. Thank you. Yeah, so I work with students dealing with like financial aid stuff, working with financial wellness as far as like literacy and just understanding, navigating all the financial things a student might need to navigate in college and beyond.
Beyond.
And beyond.
To infinity. Alright. What's up, y'all? I'm the last one. It's Brian Palomo. I use he, they pronouns. So I work for the mentoring team here. So I'm the senior coordinator of curriculum development. It's basically a fancy way of saying I put together all the workshops, classes, etc. that happen within mentoring. So if any of y'all do anything within mentoring or New Start, you're welcome.
I wish. I've been telling everybody.
I'm just kidding. No, I love what I do. I love working with the mentoring team. I don't work as much directly with students as much as I used to, but either way, it's great fun, and hopefully those of you who've been a part of mentoring have enjoyed some of the stuff that we do, and been able to interact with these fellas as well.
I've been super appreciative with my time being here. I've been here for around a year and a half. I'm not good at math.
Okay.
In Thrive. Mm-hmm. I've been a part of the U of A since grad school, 2019. Pandemic baby, for sure. So that was quite a roller coaster. But skipping past my 3 years working in housing and residential life, I transitioned to this role over in the Thrive Center. And I think that honestly, this has been like the most welcoming environments that I have ever been a part of at the university, just like transparently speaking. There's always a lot of challenges that's going on around the university, and I feel like, Thrive doesn't have all the answers, of course, but we can get the answer, and there's always going to be like some type of answers provided. And I feel like for me as a first gen student, that was something that I struggled at, was trying to navigate through the university and trying to troubleshoot things alone within like me being isolated or not having that community that I always wanted. I feel like I got that here with you guys. So I'm really appreciative to be around like a supported team and to be in a supportive environment. I don't know how you all feel about, the Thrive Center, but I think that when it comes to comfortability, a lot of students definitely find comfort within being in a space. So for me, I wanted to just go into the whole purpose of the podcast. It's basically to get an understanding of what the Thrive Center entails, what stems out of the Thrive Center. We're going to be talking about men of color. We're going to be talking about a lot of different pressing issues, pressing challenges, the things that we do. It's going to be, both pros and cons of the podcast, but I'm really, invested in hearing you all's, stories and you all's background of just like your life in general in and outside of the campus. So the podcast is going to be shaped in a lot of different things. So just going back, my background as a whole, I oversee the Men of Color Initiative. Obviously, this is a MOC podcast, so we got some, when I say MOC, that means Men of Color. So we wanted to bring you all with some like-minded individuals who are identifying as men of color in the Thrive Center to to the podcast to just, release the things that we are feeling, the things that we think that you all should know and understand. So we hope that you get something out of the podcast, of course, because we are very resource oriented. I guess I want to just segue right into just the MLC cohort and how that was founded. I know, Derwin, you spoke about having this relationship with TJ. So I guess we can just, start there. Mm-hmm. I think everybody has a good bond with TJ Brown. TJ isn't with us anymore. He's still here with us. He isn't in the Thrive Center anymore with us.
This is where we have TJ's face floating.
Yeah, this is TJ.
He's right over there. Yeah, what up? You.
Hopefully our producer can add this in here.
Maybe we can get him as a guest.
Yeah.
Might be able to make that happen.
Most definitely should get him as a guest.
Get y'all the pleasure.
Yeah. But that's pretty much where it all grounded from, the ideas of just working with men of color retention. The basically. And then within just like to put everything out there really quick, the MLC cohort pretty much then stemmed from retention rates not being the best at the U of A for men of color in general. They honestly are not the best. So we wanted to provide a space where men of color on campus can feel like they can make a place home away from home, that they can get resources. Resources is going to be heavily mentioned in the podcast because I think that we are all resource oriented. So a bulk of what the Men of Color Initiative is about is offering those resources to the actual students. And these are cohorts that we are building from scratch. So this started in 2021. Yep, 2021 in the fall time. I started my journey in January, but TJ Brown is the person who initiated the whole initiative and got the grounds running for it. So we appreciate you, TJ, for doing that. And it's pretty much been a working just cohort just in general. We've been trying to find ways to initiate different things to make the bond a little bit tighter within the cohorts that we're bringing together. We're still building the curriculum and revising things, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. But with our numbers are really good, actually. So within the cohort, we meet once a week, and it's to get first year men of color to the next academic school year. So move them on from the first year to the second year to the third to the fourth, and hopefully they can do some graduate work as well. But we are just very intentional about just team building, career development, personal growth. Having conversation is built off intersectionality, so understanding each other's background, knowing what's out in the U of A that we should focus on, and knowing the things that isn't the best for us that we can build a robust plan to make it better. So that's just a little bit about, the work that I do and my intentionality within the MLC cohort. My question for you all is, what has been your experience here just as a man of color in general? Like, have you felt like this is a place for you? And you can say where you're from as well, or originally where you're from, a little bit of your background, but have you felt like the U of A provides a safe space for men of color in general?
That's a lot of questions. All bundled up. That's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Answer whichever question you feel comfortable with.
Sheesh. I can give it a shot, I guess. So I moved here in 2019 as well. I moved here in the summer. I moved actually. Another shout out to TJ. I feel like TJ gonna be on every single episode. But I met TJ when I was hi. No, I wasn't that old, but I was a freshman in college, first year. So maybe hi and emotional intelligence, maybe. But anyway, so I met TJ back then, and he was a really impactful part of my college experience. Honestly, a lot of these things that we're talking about in terms of thinking about race, gender, unpacking really masculinity and perceptions that we have of that, and how that really implicitly dictates a lot of our behavior, etc. But throughout all that, he once I was in grad school, he moved here and was in the position that he was, that we all know him from. And I was graduating graduate school, I was job searching, and TJ told me about Thrive, told me to apply. I ended up applying, I got a job here. That's how I ended up pulling up over here. Because I probably would have taken the plunge somewhere in general, but specifically coming here, I don't think that would have happened unless I got introduced that way. But depending on how you view things, it's just kind of like how the world, it depends if you feel there's coincidences or not, or things are meant to be that way, etc. But I moved here, and I think that the fact that I was moving here and knew TJ as well as entering specifically Thrive made that transition a lot easier for me, specifically thinking about what you were talking about earlier, right? And just the consistent active work to create the most inclusive space that we can, right? Like radically inclusive in a lot of ways. Obviously there's some ways to build and to improve on, which we can get into later. But I think just generally entering into the space that we were in helped. One thing that we did notice, and I think the numbers have fluctuated over the years, but we were one of the few spaces that were kind of like overrepresented in terms of men of color that were working on the staff. Granted, there was a diversity within that, but nonetheless, there were a lot of men of color. And so that definitely really helped in terms of creating a space, because we do know that education is generally largely a woman's space, which, not that that's a bad thing, right? But it's kind of like finding that balance and understanding what that looks like. And so it was a big adjustment though, and I'll get into it later with some other things that we'll be talking about, but it was just a big culture shock. Where I grew up, I grew up in a military family, so we moved around, but where I did like middle school and high school, it was like central, southern-ish Virginia, around like Petersburg area, if folks are familiar with that. So there were just not a lot of Latinos, like just not a lot. There were a handful, but pretty much everybody was either connected to the military base, mostly, it was white folks, and then otherwise it was like Black and Asian folks, lots of Black folks being around the area, and then people who just grew up in the area. But it was a pretty strong racial binary, so I didn't really get a lot of chance to deep dive into my culture, both in terms of just being Latino, in general, in terms of like being Mexican American and what that looks like, but also how I connect in terms of my masculinity to that as well. So coming here, it's kind of been a part of that journey as well, reconnected to my culture and the language and different things, although albeit in a different area, right, from where my family's from. And there's lots of layers to that as well. But that's also been a big part of my journey. It was a big culture shock, because kind of like when we talk about men of color, there's so much diversity within that and what that means. And just the environment, the community, and everything that I grew to enjoy about that is just very different here. It's just a different environment. And it's like a really fascinating thing to think about in terms of what I got used to, and what it looks like here. And I know, like I said, I know that's something that we're going to talk about in terms of like specifically the breakdown here and what that looks like, and finding community and things like that, and connection. But having Thrive was a big part. I definitely agree with you on that.
Most definitely. Anybody else want to chime in on like how you've built community within the University of Arizona?
Yeah, so my experience goes back. I've been here quite a while here at U of A. I started here as a master's student. I was a transfer student, and I was I have a family, and so I transferred down here to do my master's program. And coming to the university was very, very different, because I'd never really been down to Southern Arizona, even though I'm from Arizona. But it was a different part of the community, that makes up the diversity of Arizona as a state. But I came here for one purpose reason, to work with my uncle. And so I already had a person of color already located down here that I already knew, had a connection with, familial connection with, and I wanted to come work with him. So I came down here to do my master's. And when I got here, I didn't really see a lot of, connections with other student populations. Granted, I'm a non-traditional student too as well, in that sense that I started my undergraduate years later on. I didn't go straight from high school. It took years later. But I eventually started, and I came here, and I think my first connection with was my brother Dan Ziapan, and he was a person of color, Asian Pacific American identity, and he and I connected very quickly. I was going to get resources at NASA, and unfortunately, there wasn't anybody there at the time to kind of help me out, and Dan saw me looking for some questions, some answers, And so he reached out to me, and we made a connection there, just all native connection, introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, what's your family, where you're coming from. So it was really a connection with Dan and I right off the bat. And since that time, I've been connected with him still today, to this day. But my connection building community is really seeking out, people that are like-minded, people who have similar backgrounds, similar experiences. And usually you find those in just conversations, right? Kind of having those conversations. That's kind of how I built community here. In the past, I think in 2014, 15, I had a brother named Steve Martin, who was Muskogee Cree from Oklahoma, who transferred here. And he was the director of NASA, Native American Student Affairs at that time. And he and I connected very quickly too, working through Thrive Center, through our programming. He had a program there called First Year Scholars, and I was working at the time as a coordinator for Cultural Learning Community Program. And so I worked with his program and all the other CRC programs, CRC's, Cultural Resource Centers. And so in that similar conversation came up that we're having today about men of color, right? Because we had a Native population at that time. And looking at the data and looking at information, though, our Native men were falling short. GPA, unit, curricular activities, sign-in, events, activities that we're doing. We hardly saw Native men coming into those events, or those, even in the space, we hardly saw Native men coming into those, or people who identify as Native men coming into those spaces, using the resources, or even being present, visible. And so we started asking that question, my brother and I, Steve, at that time, like, okay, what's the problem? What's the situation? Why is it like this? What concern, what questions do they have, or challenges are they dealing with? And so we started talking about it. And at that time, Steve we put together a program called the Men's Prayer Circle through NASA. He had some funding coming in, and we were able to provide some food and things of this nature. And it was just a development stage. We started meeting every other week for the first year, and it kind of stemmed from there and started growing. We did a first year. And so it was very interesting listening to these students and coming from different backgrounds, not just Native background. We also have professors, faculty, administrators who identify as Native American, who identify as male, who came into these spaces too as well. And we also had people who didn't identify as male too, but they're a person of color, and there were LGBTQ communities too as well who came into these spaces, and we had conversations with them. And so that kind of stemmed my community building in a sense, right, of men of color in that sense here at the University of Arizona. And through that work that we did, it lasted for about 3 years. And my brother Steve ended up taking another career opportunity. He took that path, and so he left the program, or left the university. But that's how it started out with me. And through that, we were able to make connections with the local tribal nations, the Tohono Nation, the Yaqui Nation. I have relatives there that I call, brothers and sisters to this day, through our connection with each other through the University of Arizona, but also in the larger community, and doing activities with these our students who were in part of our program at that time. Those first 2 years that we did it, for 2 to 3 years. And so it was a wonderful program, wonderful initiative that started at that time, but coming into Thrive Center and how it started here through Thrive Center, I was really happy to see it. I was happy that our program picked it up and continued to move with it in a sense, in a different format, different setting, in a different space. And so, and also bringing in other student representatives too from different cultural backgrounds. So I was really happy to see it. But also here at U of A, I think Robert McEwen is another person of contact who really got me connected to Thrive Center, who got me to my foot in the door, you could say, as a grad GA, but also as a professional staff in that sense. So he and I connected in a lot of different ways. Through high school, we had mutual friends that we grew up with, Bob's from Benson. I grew up in northern Arizona, so we had similar connections there. So I think that community building from further out, our experiences connecting, they come together in a sense in various different ways as us as men of color, right? We have different connections and different outlets and different experiences that we have that we bring to the table, and we're able to communicate and make those connections with one another. I don't know how it is, but I think it's just like, I'd like to see a coincidence or just fate in that sense, but that's how I feel community here. And just be walking around Thrive Center, I think I connect with all my colleagues, but also the younger students too coming in, all the questions and concerns that they have. I knew when I first went to college, it was very difficult, very strange, very awkward, very sometimes welcoming, unwelcoming in some spaces, like especially walking at night, right? And I always jingle my keys and stuff like that. I wonder, do these young students deal with this stuff, right? And it's more of like survival mode in a sense, in a lot of different ways, but also in the sense of giving back and being intentional about how we're working, how we're connecting with our student population, but also people in general on campus. We're not, at least I always tend to think that I have this feeling like, am I a threat sometimes, right? In some spaces, some areas, in a sense, right? But also, I want people to know that we're not a threat. And I think sometimes the perception of what goes out across social media, but also in society in general, sometimes we are viewed as like that. And that's something that I think we're going to talk further on later on down the road. But thank you for this opportunity to present and talk and share my experiences and my ideas and thoughts on this topic. I appreciate that.
Yes, indeed. Very insightful. What about you, Fred? Did someone bring you to Arizona, or did you know of anybody? Because I feel like their background was a little bit unique because they came in to the university like already networking and knowing folks on campus. But what about your experience? Did you know folks, or?
I mean, that's kind of how my experience was too, to be honest. So, like, trying to approach this question, like, think about how I want to approach this question about like what it was like for me as an undergrad here versus what it is like for me now as a professional staff member coming back like 20 years later, building community, particularly amongst men of color. Like as a student in 2001, it was, I don't even think I was aware enough of myself, my own personal identity development to know what I was missing, right? It's like similar to what Brian was sharing. Like I grew up, not where Brian grew up, I grew up in Arizona, but I grew up amongst like no other Asians, right? It was very common for me to be like the only Asian person wherever I go. So when you don't have it, you don't know you're missing it, right? So I went through college, a lot of my youth probably thinking, I don't even know if it's too strong to say I had like internalized racism towards Asian folks, right? So I think that that's something that I had to deal with at that time. I think like there was resources, I connected with men of color, but it was mostly like Latinos, Black folks. I wasn't like, I would go to APASA and I had like some peers and people in APASA, that's the Asian Center at the university. Dan being somebody that I did connect with, but it wasn't actually like the place that I went, right? I was spending more time at the, what's now called the Guerrero Center, hanging out than I was at APASA, right? So I think there's like a lot to unpack there, as far as like how comfortable I was being a man of color, being an Asian man of color, on this campus in Arizona. So that was sort of my experience there, or then I should say. Now, coming back, I was reintroduced to folks that I knew back then. So I'm now working with people who were peers of mine when we were like in college at the same time. But as far as connecting with the community here, I mean, through Thrive Center, it's been amazing, right? Because Thrive Center is so connected to all these different cultural centers, programs. So in that sense, it was really easy to feel welcome, to feel like there were folks here that I could connect with, like in the work that we do, but also in identity, just sort of sharing similar values or having like a similar mission, I guess. So yeah, for me, like, I don't know, I guess it's just hard to gauge. And also like when I'm talking about back then as an undergrad, I'm also talking about like over 20 years ago, right? So the world is different. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Very insightful. I just wanted to see if your experience was a little bit more unique than mine. Because for me, I didn't know anyone when I came over here. I literally, like when I accepted the job, I had never even been here before. Never been to Arizona. Originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I spent a lot of time in Milwaukee and in Houston for school. So when I first came to Arizona, I'm like, wow, I'm in Arizona. I don't have any family. I don't have any friends. I literally came like solo, on a solo mission with just me. My objective was just to, get into grad school and finish grad school. That was something that nobody in my family ever was able to do. And I only came here because it was a full ride. So, of course, when money is involved, we're going to go where the money is. And that was pretty much how I got here. So I didn't come here with a lot of support. So it was kind of different for me to connect and to build community amongst other men of color, just in Tucson, just in general. So I think that for me, I'm really grateful and appreciative of just having my fraternity experience during undergrad, because if I didn't join a fraternity in undergrad, I probably would never had a good opportunity to build the community that I wanted here in Arizona. Although our chapter is deceased, now I'm here at the U of A. Hopefully we can bring it back. There wasn't like a lot of ways for me to connect with other Black men, other folks who identify as what I identify as here in Arizona. I didn't know where to find them. I didn't know where to go. And the only resource that I really had to that was my fraternity. So like I did a lot of different outreach before coming out here to folks that are in my fraternity that's out here, and it pretty much brought me in and got me acclimated to the Tucson city. So very appreciative of that, and that was the way that I pretty much came in to build community outside of the campus. But when it comes to the actual campus, I don't think that I actually like built the community that I wanted to foster here at the university because of our numbers with Black men. I don't have anything against other races or ethnicities, of course, but all my life I've just grew up around Black folks, right? I've been to HBCU schools. That was what I was comfortable with. But of course I had different friends and different ethnicities, but I feel like in Milwaukee, we were very like, in the schools that I was in, it was very one race driven. But it wasn't until I got here into the Thrive Center until I started to have like a diverse mindset when it comes to like working through different backgrounds and different situations that would happen on a college campus that was outside of my race. So very grateful to have that. But I'm glad that you all were able to, build some community because that's very important when it comes to being here at the university. You definitely want to do that, especially as a man of color because of our percentages here. But I know we spoke a lot about different things that we're going to be talking about during the podcast, but I just wanted to name a few for you all that are listening. So we're going to be talking about just regular experiences that we have, so regular college experiences. We're going to be talking about code switching. A lot of folks know that in school or in any professional setting that code switching is definitely going to be something that you want to consider or something that you have a skill to do. Not necessarily meaning or thinking that you need to have that skill, but it's something to consider having as a skill. And we'll go through a little bit more of that. We're also going to be talking about perceptions of masculinity and what that means, unpacking actually what masculinity means to us. And then we're also going to be dismantling systemic oppression and like what does that mean and how does that exist on a college, university, or here at the University of Arizona. So we have a lot of different topics. If you want us to talk about a specific topic, drop that in the comment section right below. But other than that, this is our podcast. Welcome to the Unfinished Legacy podcast. And you are here with Derwin, Fred, Brian, and I. Yeah, we're hoping that you enjoy the roller coaster because it gets kind of frightening when you're with us sometimes.
It's unfinished.
But we're brothers.
We're happy and we're singing and we're good.
High five, guys.
Oh no.